commodity, as their, product. And in that way, I do question, there isn't need to put a real price on things that capitalism has failed in some regards to do. I mean, the cost that they got from those trees they took out didn't really include the ecosystem and the damage that they did in that. So I'm not, advocating for technocracy, but what I want to point out with this is to say they're taking things that they did wrongly in the first place, and then they're selling it back to us to say, well, technocracy will fix all of this, right? But I just...
Okay, now, this guy, his mother was sterilized by eugenicists back in the 1950s. He has been on a quest to get to the bottom of why people do things for a really long time, and he is famous in the world for exposing the Trilateral Commission and basically the collusion of many corporations across a long period of time, overriding the entire United States government. This woman is basically a whistleblower, Dana Ashley.
I just want people to understand that the propaganda that they're pushing us through this sustainable development is not what we are going to get in the end. And I really, really wanted to point that out. The altruistic things they sell you is to get you roped into it emotionally so that you'll accept it. But in truth, it is not at all what they plan to do in the end. So I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, but I wanted to look at the goals of sustainable development one at a time. And maybe I can share my screen and we can take a look at them.
Absolutely. And okay. when we're done with that, I will give you some documentation to back up what you just said.
Oh, okay. All right.
Go ahead. I want to get into the sustainable development goals.
It's huge, and people really need to understand this because this is what's coming. This is definitely what's coming. Okay. As you can see here, these are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Again, you don't hear the word technocracy, but you do hear about this a lot. And they've even now come out and say, what is it, climate deniers. They have all these phrases to vilify and make people criminals. I know the climate actually is changing. It's changing because they're changing it. Weather manipulation is a very old science, and that seems so just evil. But my friends, this is what is happening. I just want to make a quick note to back up this very loaded statement I made in this interview. Not that any of you need any reminders about how every tragic weather event under the sun today is blamed on climate you-know-what. But I'll make one point to effectively back up this idea of intentional events to push us into these SD goals. It's on the topic of fires. Being in California myself throughout some very scary fire seasons, I've seen with my own eyes evidence of very abnormal activity connected to these fires. But with all that devastation, one with discerning eyes can clearly see what we are told are wild forest fires. They just so happen to skip the forests. In the 2017-18 fires, we see dustification of homes to the ground. We see cars flipped upside down. This is not possible with normal physics. Oftentimes of the homes, there was nothing left, no granite, no steel. That's not what happens in normal fires. Meanwhile, trees stand green all around them. We see melted glass and liquefied aluminum on the ground around the cars. But it's common knowledge that those things don't just melt without a kiln to surround them, so the temperature can be steadily maintained between 1200 to 2000 degrees, when open-air fires typically only peak at 900.
Okay, now here's the deal. In order to melt aluminum, you've got to have a consistent 1200 to 1400 temperature. And a forest fire doesn't even barely get to 900. So it is impossible for automobile safety glass to melt down in a forest fire. It's impossible for aluminum wheels and engine blocks to melt down in a forest fire.
To even at the most 1100 degrees, you can see here in this test that they did. That's a raging fire. Never hit 900. The government has already admitted way back in 2003 that they have directed energy, you-know-what, WEAPONS technology. We know such devices could feasibly accomplish this kind of physics, but why? This brings us back to SD goals. Perhaps it's just a coincidence that when you superimpose the areas where these fires are raging, they just so happen to be the same areas that were proposed to be set aside to be off limits to human use zones that you see here on this.
Okay, this map, this is the United Nations Agenda 21 map. The red areas are areas for no human beings whatsoever. Only transportation potentially. And the areas where the fires are the exact areas where they want people cleared out. This is absolutely incredible.
This map was proposing to protect biodiversity as within the UN Biodiversity Treaty and Wildlands Project. Yeah. And this year, 2021, Idaho has had raging fires in the same exact areas that were slated to be human-free as well. And this is even though Idaho historically boasted some of the lowest fire frequency in the entire United States. And although the passing of this particular legislation that was attached to that map was blocked by some good politicians in those days, could they be moving forward anyway in a different, albeit more subversive and plainly evil way, while they beat the drum of climate CHANGE all the way? Or is this just a coincidence? I'll let you be the judge. They're changing it so that we will be willing to accept their sustainable development goals. Why don't we go through here, if you can see that okay, and point out the ones that pop out to you as being a perfect equal measure of technocracy, how they're one and the same.
Technocracy.
Well, the most important thing to know about the Sustainable Development Goals is that they propose an altruistic, utopian-like society, where the promises are always at the front of the, like the carrot on a stick, string on a stick, that the promises are always delivered up front. For instance, no poverty. Well, who's for poverty? You want people to be poor? Zero hunger. You want people to be hungry? Well, no.
Sounds great.
Okay, and good health and wealth. Don't you want everybody to be healthy? And what about education? Oh, we need everybody. What about the poor people in Africa? Shouldn't they be educated too? And then you got number 5, gender equality, which we hear about all this stuff today about LGBTQ ad infinitum, and clean water and sanitation. People, they say, well, people don't have access to clean water, and it's very dangerous. And then how about number 8? I love this one, decent work and economic growth. Really? Okay. They're going to do all this for us if we merely accept their proposition of sustainable development. But when you get down a little bit further, go down a little bit more, and then you got climate action, number 13. You've got life below water. Oh, now they're talking about all the resources in the ocean, too. And life on land, number 15. They're talking about everything on the face of the earth. And I love 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, namely them telling us what to do. You have to look down into the goals to find out what they're really all about.
Right.
When you get down to the bottom of it, the only thing you have to give up to get all these benefits is all the resources of the world. You have to turn it all over to them. Everything. All the land and resources, all the water, all the minerals, everything under the ocean, everything on the face of the planet. Turn it over to them to be put into a global common trust to be reallocated to you and me according to their own vision of social justice.
I want to show you that you don't even have to dig deep in the SESDEV goals to find what Patrick mentions here. In their very preamble, they state it clearly. Look at this. We are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources, and taking urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. Managing the planet's, the entire world's, natural resources. And they will manage nothing less than the planet's consumption and production. And what is the goal of technocracy again? Quote, the science of social engineering to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. Their stated goals are the same. Technocrats will produce and distribute the world's resources, and in SESDEV, they call it production and consumption.
consumption. Either way, it's them. They get to decide what you are allowed to consume.